This deal wasn't announced with drama or threats, but behind closed doors, it may have changed how Washington looks at Canada. Canada has just taken a bold step on the world stage, and it's not the move many in Washington were expecting. Prime Minister Mark Carney, on a historic trip to Beijing, the first by a Canadian Prime Minister in nearly a decade, announced a preliminary but landmark trade agreement with China that resets economic relations between the two countries. At its core, the deal allows up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles, EVs, into the Canadian market annually at a sharply reduced tariff of 6.1%, down from the 100% duty Canada had imposed. In return, China will slash its punishing tariffs on key Canadian agricultural exports, including canola seed, lobsters, crabs, peas, and more, unlocking billions in export opportunities for Canadian farmers, processors, and harvesters for the first time in years. To many observers, this deal may look like a simple exchange of goods. But make no mistake, this moment carries strategic depth, and its implications extend deep into North America's economic and political landscape. Here's why. When Canada slapped massive tariffs on Chinese EVs in 2024, it was following the lead of the United States and the European Union, aiming to protect North American auto manufacturing from heavily subsidized foreign competition. China responded with tariffs on Canadian farm products that quickly escalated and froze out Canada's second-largest market for canola, a $4 billion industry, as well as peas, seafood, and other staples. That tit-for-tat trade war stung. Exports to China slumped sharply in 2025, costing farmers and businesses dearly. Carney's announcement in Beijing signals a deliberate pivot away from tit-for-tat escalation toward engagement, negotiation, and strategic realignment. In a joint press conference with China's leadership, Carney described the renewed relationship with Beijing as realistic, respectful, and interest-based. He noted that China's duties on canola seed are expected to fall from about 84% to around 15% by March, and that anti-discrimination tariffs on other Canadian agricultural products will be removed at least through the end of the year. Carney also emphasized his view that Canada's relationship with China has become more predictable than its economic relationship with the United States, a point that carries real geopolitical weight. This shift is not accidental. For years, Canada's economy has been heavily tied to that of its southern neighbor. Roughly 70% of Canadian exports have historically gone to the U.S., dwarfing Canada's trade with China, which accounted for less than 4% of total shipments in 2024. But that imbalance is precisely why Carney's strategy matters. The world is changing. Global trade patterns are fragmenting, and protectionist pressures, particularly under the U.S. leadership of Donald Trump, have introduced uncertainty into North American supply chains. Trump's aggressive tariffs on allies and competitors alike have rattled markets and increased the risks of relying on a single dominant partner. Carney's deal with China is part of Canada's effort to diversify trade and expand its economic options, rather than being tethered solely to U.S. policy direction. The move aligns with Ottawa's long-term goal to significantly boost non-U.S. exports by 2030. But make no mistake, this pivot carries controversy at home. In Ontario, where Canada's auto sector remains a major economic engine, Premier Doug Ford blasted the EV component of the agreement. He argued the deal creates a foothold for Chinese vehicles in Canada without firm guarantees of investment in the domestic auto industry or protections for Canadian workers. Critics in Ottawa also pointed out the political and economic inconsistency of Carney's approach. Only months earlier, Canada had described China as a key strategic threat, imposing steep tariffs aimed at protecting domestic industry. Now, those hard lines have softened in the name of trade and diversification. Conservative leaders have warned that Canada risks loosening its economic ties to its most important ally and could find itself politically isolated, particularly if the United States views this deal as contradictory to North American strategic interests. And here's where Washington enters the story, because reactions from the U.S. have been mixed. Some U.S. officials have openly suggested Canada might regret its decision to open the door to Chinese EVs, warning that it could complicate broader North American industrial strategy and weaken protective measures against subsidized foreign competitors. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer criticized the move as problematic, even as President Trump publicly played down the threat, calling the deal a good thing, while other U.S. voices maintained skepticism about its long-term impact. This mix of praise and concern highlights a tension at the heart of Canada's new strategy. Is Carney creating greater economic opportunity for Canadians, or is he straying too far from traditional alignment with the United States? Carney's answer to that question is rooted in his philosophy of value-based realism. He has argued that Canada must accept the world as it currently exists, a world where power is distributed, alliances are shifting, and economic certainty cannot be taken for granted. By opening Canadian markets to competitive Chinese EVs and simultaneously obtaining meaningful tariff relief for agricultural producers, Carney aims to strike a balance between economic pragmatism and national interest. The deal also includes cooperation in other sectors such as clean energy, finance, and even potential growth in natural resources exports, including liquefied natural gas destined for Asian markets, part of a broader effort to integrate Canada more deeply into global trade networks beyond North America. As a result, this trade agreement is far more than a simple exchange of tariffs. It is a statement of strategy, one that acknowledges the realities of a multipolar world while preserving Canada's autonomy in global affairs. For Canadian farmers and producers who saw their markets shut down by retaliatory tariffs, this agreement offers a path back to prosperity. For Canadian consumers, more access to international EVs could mean lower prices and increased competition. And for Ottawa, it represents a bold test of diplomatic agility and economic diversification. But for Washington, the message is unmistakable: Canada is willing to chart paths of engagement that do not always mirror U.S. policy. And that shift, subtle, calculated, and quietly powerful, may well be the reason this move is making officials in Washington pay attention. Carney did not announce this deal with fanfare and swagger. He chose restraint, negotiation, and mutual interest as his tools. And in a world marked by uncertainty and polarization, that may be the smartest move Canada has made in years.